Welcome to another Fanboy Film Nerd Galaxy class spoiler review, Captain Marvel. We're going to break this film down systematically. This is going to be the new look, new format for my podcast. We're going to have longer episodes so we hit as many different aspects of the film as possible. Hope you enjoy it. The story itself, I think, obviously, the more knowledge you have about the source material, the better the source material is as far as aiding you with the movie when you go see it. I am not a huge Captain Marvel fan. I do know a lot about her, but not enough where I could call myself anywhere close to being an expert. So going into this movie, I knew I was going to learn about this character primarily from this movie, but also how she fits into this Marvel Cinematic Universe. And obviously with the next big film coming out, which is Avengers Endgame, how does she play a part in that? Now, previous to this film, obviously we have characters like Doctor Strange and Ant-Man that had their own solo films before they were in other films. Like Ant-Man, before he was in Civil War, he had his own film. Doctor Strange before in Infinity War, excuse me. So we knew we were going to get an origin story with Captain Marvel. And the story itself, when you start talking about the Kree and the Skrulls, if you don't know anything about that, all that has to be explained in this movie. So a big portion of this movie I felt was dedicated primarily to world building this world Captain Marvel is in. But she's not only in the cosmic aspect of it, but her roots here on Earth, her being an insanely good pilot. Obviously, if you're watching this, you've seen the film, so I'm not going to go into details about, how's the plot. If you're watching this, you already know the plot, so we're just talking specifics here. To get all your energy from a ship that has power in it, and you absorb the energy from whatever technology Marvel had from, obviously, her cosmic origins, it's hard to explain that. It's hard to explain to the audience just what are Captain Marvel's powers. What are Carol Danvers' powers? And how do they work? And I think they explained it, but there were some scenes in this movie involving the story where you knew going into this movie how overpowered she was going to be with anybody in this movie, unless you're going to introduce a Thanos in this movie, saying he's going to be in this movie as well. Who was going to be the villain? You're thinking, who's going to face her? So a lot of the movie is based on her not having her powers, and I knew that was going to happen going in, because obviously you can't have her just destroying things left and right with no consequences as far as her being damaged or hurt or killed. We know she's not going to get killed. She's in Endgame. We know that she has no formidable foe. She's Captain Marvel. So the story itself, I felt like needed to be rooted in something, and this is the aspect of the story I think they did very well. I thought making this more of a buddy cop film with Samuel L. Jackson as, almost like a Lethal Weapon type deal, where you have, just two cops, basically, two people on a mission doing something together and exploring each other, and it happens to be primarily, for the most part, very different from each other as far as style or how to approach things. And this is the ultimate version of that, when you have somebody who is a cosmic being being partnered up with someone who doesn't even know much about what he's doing, and is kind of having suspicions that there are more things out there than just your run-of-the-mill terrorists here on Earth. Where Nick Fury, where we find him at, is that he's in that space. He's this young guy, he's figuring it out, and he's trying to also figure out how can we best protect this planet. And he's thinking of it only in terrorist terms, or, foreign and domestic disputes, wars, world wars, civil wars, things like that. Introduce Carol Danvers as an alien in this movie, and then he is quickly thrust into the world that will lead him down the path of S.H.I.E.L.D. and who we know Nick Fury to be in these films now, the older version of Nick Fury. I thought they did a very good job of having Fury be humanized to the point where he almost seems like a completely different character than he is when we first see him in what was it? Iron Man 2, I believe, is the first time we saw him. So, and obviously he's been in all these other films. So I think that is in itself one of the great things about this movie, is that at its core, it's really more of a relationship movie and a growing experience between Nick Fury and Carol Danvers. While Carol is trying to find her past and find out who she is, Nick Fury his mind is set on the future. He's thinking, way down the line, okay, if she exists, then what the fuck else is out there? And I love that about this movie. I thought that was very interesting. I thought Nick Fury he is my favorite character in the movie. I love Nick Fury to begin with. That he is one of the characters I have read a lot of material from, and he's always been one of the characters that I felt like was a good representation of a character that can be anyone. Anybody can play Nick Fury. You could have Nick Fury be a woman, an Asian woman, a white woman, a black man. It doesn't matter. He's one of these characters. He just fits. He's the glue that somehow holds a lot of this stuff together. And I think films that he's not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I feel his absence in it. You feel it. And I thought in Infinity War, I felt his absence in the movie. He's that strong of a character. And I think Samuel Jackson plays Nick Fury so well. And I think, as well, the studio did a good job of de-aging him. We've seen a lot of de-aging effects here lately. It's becoming the norm now. You can extend an actor's career now by having them be de-aged. And I think that's really good, because we're seeing really, really good actors now still be able to keep roles in the same role without having to be recast based on just how old they are. They are getting so good at aging characters, as far as aging them, way older than they actually are, or way younger. So that's ensuring that we're getting the best acting possible and the best performances possible for these characters. Because a film like Infinity War, you need that kind of cast to make something like that work, because a lot of those characters don't have a lot of screen time. So if you can get a Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Mark Ruffalo and Scarlett Johansson and on and on and on and on, there will not be a bad scene in the movie acting wise. Those are just too strong of characters being portrayed by really world-class actors. And I think Disney has done a very good job of that. They cast these roles perfect. Now, I will not say that I think they cast the role of Captain Marvel perfect. She's one of the rare ones I've seen so far in this cinematic universe where you can picture someone else playing that role. Brie Larson might not even be the best fit for this role. I like Brie Larson as a person, and I like her acting, but I think a lot of people said in the trailers that story-wise, is she going to be able to carry this story forward herself? She is the Captain Marvel. She's the most powerful being in this universe right now. Can she portray that? And there were scenes in this movie where I didn't buy it, and particularly the fight scenes where she's not using her powers. When she's not using her powers, I don't buy she can do some of the stuff she can do, and that's only based on Brie Larson. It's got nothing to do with, I think, a woman or something like that. This isn't any social justice warrior babble going on right now. It's just a different type of actor. I still deeply believe Emily Blunt should have been Black Widow. I just think Emily Blunt would have played the perfect Black Widow. And that's no shade on Scarlett Johansson. She obviously is crushing this role. But I personally had always thought that Emily Blunt would have made a better Black Widow. So, and this is just another good example. And there's some of the other ones too. Going even back to the X-Men, I remember saying, I wish Harvey Keitel would have played Wolverine in the original X-Men movie. I was just, because there were rumors going around that Harvey Keitel was going to play Wolverine in Bryan Singer's X-Men. I, till this day, still think that maybe could have worked, but obviously, no. Hugh Jackman is Wolverine. So they get these things right. And going down the line, Brie is probably going to continue to crush this role and knock it out of the park. I just think for this particular movie, the story was so simplified that it was very, very hard to believe she could do some of the things that she could do, because they had to focus on a lot of different things in this movie that I didn't really think they had time to do in this film. The film is actually shorter to me, felt shorter than it needed to be. I felt like the movie needed another 20 minutes, to be honest. It just, some of the, especially once it gets to the third act, it is very rushed to me. And that's not normal for a Disney, a Marvel Cinematic Universe film. Most of the time, they get that pacing down perfect. But this movie had a little bit of a pacing issue because there was so much exposition. When it slowed down, it slowed down. I personally thought that the opening of the movie, I would say after the first 10 or 15 minutes, I think there was a stretch in there where I literally was bored. It wasn't because the movie's bad or anything. It's just because when Nick Fury wasn't on the screen and it was just Brie, I found myself getting bored. And I don't know if it's because of the way that they played it. From the trailers, it did seem like maybe we should all give it time. She'll figure it out. but having watched it, still feels a little wooden and just wasn't fully invested in her enough to actually care about anything she was doing in the third act. And that's just a first viewing. I'm gonna go see this movie again because I am a fanboy film nerd, and I definitely am gonna go see this at least once, if not twice, just because I love these films. It is not a bad film at all. We'll get to that at the bottom of the list, obviously. Let's move on to the cast. The cast obviously is very good. You have Brie Larson, Samuel Jackson, you have Jude Law, you have Annette Bening, and you have Agent Coulson, the guy who plays him. He's slipping my brain right now. I'm not using any show notes at all with this. I'm just going completely off the cuff. So this is going to be a pretty lengthy podcast. So I liked cast. I thought it worked pretty well. I thought there were times in the film where some of the characters did not work. And Carol Danvers' friend, the black woman, and I'm forgetting her name right now. Again, I'm not using show notes for this one, so this is pretty raw. I didn't think she was up to par to be in the same room with some of those actors. Ben Mendelsohn being another one. She stuck out to me, and I'm not sure why. I don't think she's a bad actress. I just think this is a case, like I was talking about before, when you have that many good actors and actresses, everybody's got to carry their weight. And I just thought some of the performances between Brie and her friend took me out of the movie. And I don't normally say that phrase because I don't know what took me out of the movie. You're watching the movie, but it did. I was looking at them and I wasn't buying anything. I wasn't buying that they were good friends. I didn't buy the friendship all that much. And it's not because it's not something that is there. We know that. They're telling us this, but I just didn't see it. There was just something very strange about that had Carol talking to people in. It felt weird. And I know it's because she's a fish out of water type of deal. But it felt weird even when she's talking to people of her own world, the cosmic universe. I just thought there was some scenes in the film that actually was distracting to the point where I was actually looking at them act instead of just watching two characters talk, if that makes any sense. I was fully aware they were acting. And that didn't cross my mind one time in Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's like you just watching a movie, but there were scenes in here where I'm like, she's acting. That's not good. That's not good. And I said, it's not a knock on the actual story. Like, 'cause I think it works. I think it works very well. There were just certain scenes where the dialogue felt weird and awkward. I didn't think that the jokes landed all that much. I love Nick Fury in this film because comic relief was more of a physical thing. You could see, he's always eating something, or the way he just comes up with a line and gives a look or whatever. But every freaking time Carol Danvers would say something that was supposed to be meant as a joke, I don't know if there was like these little seconds and everyone like, you should have cut right there. They just held it on a little bit too long and it made the joke awkward. And I don't like when characters always laugh at their own jokes in films either, because that gives you an awkward thing, because it's like, okay, they're laughing, but I didn't find it funny at all. I've always cringed when you see people make a joke in a movie between characters and then they give an awkward laugh, but you don't laugh at all because you was like, oh, that was supposed to be funny. And then it gets awkward. So I think all in all, those were my major issues. Really was just the story, because it was so oversimplified. And then it felt a little rushed in the third act. And I think, like, again, when we're talking about the cast here, when you have this cast, most of the dialogue worked. Again, I just thought some of the dialogue between Carol, once she's on Earth at her friend's house, I just thought there were a lot of scenes in that one that kind of just was just a little strange. And some of her interaction with Nick Fury was a little strange. The chemistry wasn't all the way there, but I bought it enough. Ben Mendelsohn, I thought also was very good. Ben Mendelsohn can be in any movie, and if I was a director or a producer and I had a movie, I'd be like, get him in every one of my movies, find a part for him. He's that good. They stick him behind this makeup, and he still is so good, if not better. It was the way he pulls off playing this scroll was brilliant. And I thought Ben Mendelsohn knocked it out of the park with his performance in this movie as this guy. I mean, he was funny at times. He could break your heart the next scene. You felt him. And if you look at that, the way he's acting, and then look at Brie Larson, who is the actual character. And again, I'm not blaming her because I don't think this is Brie Larson's fault. I just think they made Captain Marvel so bland that there was nothing. Like, I never had any emotion coming from her to the point where I was invested in her. But you got Bill Mendelsohn over here. I'm invested in his storyline with his family. You felt for him as far as what he was going through. You felt what the Skrulls were going through against the Kree. The only time I actually really felt any true emotion out of Carol, where I was like, okay, that worked, it was when she was interacting with them and she apologized to them about the Kree. And she was like, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I think that might be my favorite line in the movie from her, because that was one of the first, that was like my moment where I'm like, oh man, she is getting it. She knows what it's like not only to be human, she's piecing together her past and she's getting all these things lined up and it's all coming together for her to be Captain Marvel. And I thought when she said to them, I'm sorry, I didn't know, and you can see it in her eyes. And let's not get something twisted here. Brie Larson is an incredibly good actress. And I actually like her a lot. I think she's really good. Again, I just think she didn't have much to work with here as far as the story and as far as the character itself, Captain Marvel. I do believe, truly, that they watered her down a lot so they didn't blow their load too early before we got in the Endgame, because I think in Endgame we're going to see her fucking go crazy. And I don't have a problem with it. I watched this movie with my son, and we were both talking about how little she actually, as Captain Marvel, was in the movie doing Captain Marvel stuff. And I had to remind him, she's gonna be in another movie very shortly, and it's gonna feel like you just watched this movie, Captain Marvel, going into it. So I give them the benefit of the doubt that going into Endgame, we're going to see a lot more from her, obviously, in Endgame about what she can do. And that I will give this movie a pass on that every day of the week for the rest of my life, because these movies are incredibly hard and they're meant to be like episodes building up to a finale of a TV show. And Captain Marvel was no different. There was no need for her to go completely ape shit in this movie. I know a lot of people are probably going to complain that she didn't do all that much, that they felt like the stakes weren't that high. But I feel like if you know Endgame's around the corner, and you see the post credit scene where she shows up and says, the first thing, "Where's Nick?" and you know they're about to tell her that half the fucking universe got dusted by Thanos. We know what's coming, and I think it's acceptable. If we had to wait 2 years to see her again in Endgame, I think it'd be a different story. But we're not even waiting 3 months before we see Captain Marvel again. It's good marketing. It's a good way to put a film out. And I just, that's one thing I had to keep in the back of my mind, was that we're going to see her very soon. It's going to feel like a continuation of the Captain Marvel story. So I basically looked at Captain Marvel as basically a short film in front of the big feature, which is Endgame. So this is kind of like a prologue to Endgame, and I didn't have a problem with it at all. I thought they did a very good job of that, of not blowing their load unnecessarily. They didn't need to do that, and that's why, again, I think the cast works so well, and especially going back and having to be a period piece where you have Coulson back and Nick Fury being young, and you get to see Nick Fury's eye get taken care of by the cat, which the cat was awesome in the movie. Love the cat. My son, that was his favorite part about the movie, was the fucking cat with the tentacles flying out of his mouth, eating shit up. That was awesome. Some of the laughs in this movie were completely hilarious. That Skrull that was working with Ben Mendelsohn kept fucking up. He was fucking hilarious. He had me dying. I will say that I laughed a hell of a lot more in this movie than I did in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And that's supposed to be more of a comedic, film. And there was several times in Captain Marvel where I burst out laughing uncontrollably at some of the lines when they were doing the loading screen. They're sitting there waiting for the information to come up, and everybody just sitting there. They got this dramatic music going, and it's just holding there. You're like, wait a minute, this is awkward. What's going on? Like, oh yeah, we have to wait for shit to load. So it's stuff like that I thought they got right. We'll get into the soundtrack later when we get to the music part of this, but I just thought that aspect of it was pretty cool. I loved the wink of the eye, like the blockbuster and stuff like that, just to remind you that you're in the mid 90s, which was also fucking weird because I was 16 in the mid 90s, and when they're like treating it like it's ancient history, felt old. So let's continue on here. Directing. Quickly, I feel like the directing in this movie was it was an uphill climb because you're sandwiching this movie in between a movie like Infinity War and how do you do this? And also you got Black Panther that came out last year. You had Thor Ragnarok, and you also have Spider-Man Homecoming or Far From Home coming up this year. So we know how all those films work. So this one being its own little standalone movie, so to speak, introducing a new character into the universe. It was an uphill battle to try to compete against some of those other films as far as how good it would be, because unfortunately the Marvel Cinematic Universe has so many great films that even the really, really good ones get ranked really low. It may seem like it's not that good, but Captain Marvel, compared to some of the other films, no, it's not on par with an Avengers or a Black Panther or something like that, but it is far better than most movies that come out in that genre. It's a lot better than fucking Justice League, right? So it's just one of those things where you have to kind of put it, in concept of the film and context of the film. So it's like, you look at the concept. You got a woman flying around in outer space like a fucking something that is not even of this universe that we know. I mean, she just literally has unlimited power to a degree we don't know yet. So I think that is a challenge as a director. How do you film that? And I think that goes back again to, let's just keep it simple. Let's do a buddy cop film, and then at the end of the film, you get to see her in all her full-blown glory doing her thing, and it'll lead us right into Endgame where you'll see more of it. So I thought the strength of the film was the fact that it wasn't trying to be some of these other Marvel Cinematic Universe films. It was just trying to be its own film and setting up its own narrative and its own character to propel this character into Endgame. As far as the writing goes, I believe that the writing was really good in this movie. This is a tricky movie to pull off writing-wise. Is a lot of exposition and dialogue and world building, as we talked about before. But I feel like the writing at times got a little lazy and did some cliche stuff that we've seen 1,000 times before. Because if you remember back in Age of Ultron, when all the Avengers went to Hawkeye's house and they were hanging out, that scene where they go to Carol Danvers' friend's house is almost a carbon copy of that. So like the same fucking thing in concept. So I just felt like we've seen it. The whole time I'm thinking, I'm like, this reminds me of Age of Ultron. We've seen this type of thing before. Got a bunch of people in a room eating and drinking shit and talking about shit, exposition. And I'm like, okay, we've seen all this before. So I just thought the writing got a little lazy. I thought a lot of the jokes that were written in were not that impressive. And I think there was a lot of stuff in the film as far as improvisation goes that made the final cut that worked a lot better. There were clearly some things in this movie that they improvised and they kept it, which I thought was better than the jokes that you could tell was written into the story to build character. That's a useful tool for building a character. Humor is a very good tool for using to build up a character. Is if you cannot get someone to laugh and make them human or make them more relatable by landing a joke, or not even landing a joke, just in attempting a joke, works, because you're saying this person is capable of having a sense of humor, which will give them a trait, an emotion, something you can identify with. It's no different than anger. You can see that the villain, you always have to show how crazy this villain is. So they'll do something in the movie, like Joker hidden in Dark Knight, slamming the guy's head down on a pencil, the opening heist, you're setting up immediately, this guy's fucking crazy. So there are some cliche things that you throw in there. I just thought in Captain Marvel, they were much more out in your face. I could clearly look at the scene and be like, okay, they only put that joke in there to, get you. So it was a little weird. Sometimes context is everything, but we don't know this character yet. So it's no different than you meet somebody for the first time and then tell a joke. You're much more likely to kind of give an awkward, weird little laugh because you want to make them know that you're capable of laughing once the shit is actually funny. Right? The production of this movie with the sets and the costumes and the CGI, the effects, all that, on par with any MCU film that's been out there. I like the use of prosthetic makeup that they use for the Skrulls. I thought that was a clever thing to do instead of going full CGI like the Children of Adam and Thanos' children in Infinity War, where you have big CGI characters, which you couldn't just put prosthetics on them. So I'm glad that they went ahead and said, okay, let's just put it on them, because it takes you back to Thor: The Dark World, Guardians, the fuck, Guardians of the Galaxy, where you have a lot of different aliens that are involved in the story, and a lot of close-ups and things, like even someone like Nebula and Gamora, where you could CGI character, make a completely full CGI character, but the makeup obviously looks so much better. So I thought the Kree in this, the Skrulls in this movie, especially on Ben Mendelsohn, you could still tell he was in there. But it was just really nice and refreshing to see that, because a lot of characters nowadays, people are just so quick to just say, let's just fucking do CGI because we can make them look even weirder. It's like, no, just put the fucking makeup on them. I like that. I like that a lot. It worked. That he felt in the frame. It's not taking you out because there's some weird shit going on with his face because it's CGI. Because in Infinity War, when you see like Ebony Maw, he clearly looks CGI. He does not look photorealistic. Not like Thanos did in some of the shots. And even if you look at Thanos enough, you still can tell that he's not real. You still can. So practical makeup, whenever you can do it, I love that. The cinematography in this film was good. Now, another thing that the MCU does that I really appreciate is that even though these movies are individual episodes in an overall bigger story that all culminates in Infinity War and Endgame, when you look at these films, you still can tell that they're coming out of the same studios and that they all still work together. Captain Marvel fits in here. You can watch Guardians of the Galaxy. I cannot say that fucking shit today. You can watch Guardians of the Galaxy and Ragnarok and then watch Captain Marvel, and they feel in the same universe. They still have their own distinct style just for that movie. Like Thor Ragnarok obviously looks completely different than Thor: The Dark World, and Civil War looks completely different than the first Avenger. I like that. You can play around with the pieces enough. Black Panther doesn't look like anything in these films. Spider-Man Homecoming doesn't look like anything, but it fits. They just do such a good job of that. And I think cinematography is a huge part of that, because you get these overblown colors and shadows and beautiful shots where you can just tell there's like just so much going on in those shots than is actually on the screen. And lighting plays a big part. Now I just think I've always admired and loved the way they lit these movies in the MCU. I just love it. I think if anything Warner Brothers wants to do with fucking the DC shit is, once you look at how well they piece together their films over in the MCU just based on the visuals of it. It's like the way that they look, they are just so on point. Every detail is gone over, and I've always liked how they've do films, because they feel like comic book films, but they also feel like the real world. And each movie, even though that they're their own thing, they still fit in the overall of all these stories and all these movies. It's just pretty impressive what they've been able to pull off all the way up to Endgame. On to music and sound. Love the score of this movie. The score in this movie got me pumped up, especially at the end when she's doing her thing, full-blown fools up in outer space. That's what I was waiting for, was the cosmic shit to come in. And I thought the score in this movie really worked well with the movie. I liked it a lot. I really liked it. And I love listening to the scores of films anyway. And I was thinking the whole time, I cannot wait to get home and listen to the score of this film. It's really, really good. And I thought it worked perfectly with some of the bigger action sequences in the film. Especially that. I didn't so much notice it outside of that, but I thought it complemented the action scenes very well. And the actual soundtrack of the movie, the songs that they picked in the movie, the 1996 era, the mid-90s, when you have Nirvana in there, and you had some of the other ones, some of the other more popular songs from the 90s, I thought worked really well. And they brought them in right at the right time. Pretty fucking cool when you think about it, because I was just talking about how they piece together all these films like a puzzle, and the cinematography fits well with each film, and you can tell that like they're still in the continuity of these films. And I thought with this one, with Captain Marvel, you could watch this movie with the Thor Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy and Infinity War, and soundtrack wise, and Ant-Man and the Wasp as well. Both Ant-Man films, and even Spider-Man, they do a good job of picking music, songs that fit scenes to just make that scene seem that much more interesting, and breaks up the monotony of just having just a score, where you throw in some music during a fight scene. And obviously Guardians of the Galaxy, 1 and 2 the best job of that as far as integrating the soundtrack, because those soundtracks for those two movies are unbelievable. And I thought a half attempt of that in Captain Marvel worked. I liked the music in the movie and the sound design in this movie pretty cool. The sound design itself, I did notice, didn't seem like it was on par with like a Black Panther or something on that level. It felt more like it was just withdrawn a little bit. It felt more like toned down. They didn't really go super crazy with the sound design as far as, what the weapons sound like, what she actually sounds like when she's wrecking shit. It was simple. It was very, very simple, and I don't have a problem with it. It was just you. If you watch a movie like Aquaman, that thing is that fucking movie is so loud and it's shit blowing up and things going. I mean, the whole theater is shaking and rattling. You're like, what the fuck is going on here? Captain Marvel didn't seem quite that way with me. You would occasionally get these eruptions of big, loud sound, but a lot of the movie was very subdued and laid back, and hardly any sound going on at all. And I didn't have a problem with that. I didn't, because it made the bigger moments that much more bigger, especially at the end when she starts fucking some fools up, flying around in outer space, wrecking shit. So that takes us to, how good is it? I believe this movie is very good. It is not anywhere close to one of my favorite MCU films. In fact, it's very low on that list. And I would say, to me, it's on par with Iron Man 3, Iron Man 2, Ant-Man, Thor: The Dark World, somewhere around in there. It's just not on par with something as big, obviously, as Infinity War or Civil War or something like that, or Black Panther. It's not on that level. I think it comes closer to me, like Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Somewhere in there. It's a really good movie, but it serves as something to build characters, because a lot of people hate it. Oh my god, I cannot say that fucking word today. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. A lot of people didn't like that movie because they said they didn't do shit. And I actually like that movie because you build character. Made those characters look that much better when they went in Infinity War and we got to see them again, because we spent a whole movie building on their characters. So all those moments in Infinity War are heightened because you've already had a film that just specifically focused on building up these characters, so when the shit is the fan, you care about each and every one of them. I think the MCU does such a good job of that. They could easily, every movie come out, just make it balls to the walls action. If you look at Black Panther, there is not a lot of action in Black Panther. I think a lot of people think, if you think about it, think back on Black Panther, just how much action is actually in that movie. There's a lot of drama in Black Panther. A lot of drama. There is a lot of drama in it. Infinity War is probably the only movie I can think of where from the beginning to the end, you can't go more than 5 minutes without somebody getting the shit kicked out of them, dying, or there's a world-changing event happening. And that's how it should be, because that's what Infinity War was supposed to be. The culmination of all these films coming together, and no more building up characters, no more nothing. Let them go. Which is why Infinity War, in my opinion, has the most simplistic plot in any one of these films by far. The plot was Thanos, go get 6 stones, you guys try to stop him. Go. It works only because you have films like Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World and Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and all these films just focus on character building a lot. And if you look at even films like Captain America: The First Avenger, when you just think about it, and if you go back and check it out, it's more of a drama than it is an action movie. You're setting up a character. You can only have so much action when you're setting up a character. You can get away with it in Black Panther. He was set up in Civil War. You can get away with that in some of these other films. But if you take someone like Doctor Strange and just introduced him straight up in Infinity War, you wouldn't have given a shit about anything that happened to him in that film. That film would have seemed weakened every time he was on the screen because you don't know anything about him. Which is why I think they did such a good job of bringing Captain Marvel into this movie universe by putting her right directly in front of Endgame and pulling no punches about it, have her come up in the end of the movie and basically be like, I'm in Endgame. The average film fan doesn't know this shit. The people who know this shit are the people like, if you listen to this, you know this shit because you love movies. If you've listened this far, you love fucking movies. If you listen to this voice talk about Captain Marvel for this long in this podcast, you love movies. And I love movies. And I love the fact that we have something like this. Just think about it. If you're over the age of 25, if you're over that, you remember a time where something like this was unconceivable. Unconceivable? Inconceivable. Something, almost 25 movies worth of a narrative that ends with one movie, Endgame. Because after Endgame, we have no idea what movies are coming after this. This is the first time we've had in the MCU where a movie is going to come up and go off and go into the sunset, and we have no idea. They have not announced what's happening after Spider-Man. We have no clue what's happening after Far From Home. They have not come up with a Phase 4 promo yet or anything. We have no fucking clue what's going to happen, and I think that's awesome because it's been a long time since we've had that. We've known years in advance when all these movies coming out. We've known that Captain Marvel was going to be here years ago, and this is the first time in their MCU that we don't know. And I think that's amazing when you think about it. We are living in a very good time where we could sit and talk about Captain Marvel on a podcast for this long. Just think about it this year. When we got Spider-Man coming up, we got Endgame, the second of a giant mega epic, just following the biggest comic book movie of all time, Infinity War. And, we have this, and we have, last year we had Black Panther, and who would have ever thought we would have seen Black Panther on a big screen? It's just 25 years ago, it would have been inconceivable. Who would have thought we would have seen Thanos on screen, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange? You got Mysterio coming out. It's like, who would have ever thought that Mysterio would ever be in a movie? I mean, it's just crazy. And you have to wrap your mind around how good of a time this is. So yeah, on that basis alone, I think this is a really good movie. I highly recommend it. Go see it. Go see it twice. I really do believe it's one of, I think it's in the middle of the pack. If I had to sit down and rank it, it would probably hit right in the middle of the pack. I have to go see it again and put it in context. And obviously that context is going to change even more once we see Endgame and learn more about this character. The more we learn about character Danvers, this movie, Captain Marvel, is only going to get better. I don't think it can go down. I think it can only get better unless she does something crazy in Endgame. I don't see how anything that happens after this dealing with Captain Marvel will make this movie, Captain Marvel, not be as good or better than what it was the first time you saw it. I just think it's going to be that good, Endgame, and I think she's going to be that good Endgame because obviously in Endgame, she's been directed by the Russo brothers. No shade on the director for Captain Marvel, but I think the Russo brothers just have magic in their hands right now when it comes to creating these films. Civil War, Infinity War, Winter Soldier. These guys are on the top of the game when it comes to comic book, and I can't wait to see what these guys do with Endgame. And finally, how bad is it? It's not very bad. There are some flaws in it. I went over it, so I'm not going to go over it again. If you made it this far, you know what I didn't like about the movie. It's not much bad in it. There are some bad in it, but not much. Not much at all. I'm nitpicking, and I am picking out things that would, in other films that didn't have a connection to things like Infinity War and Black Panther and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and Iron Man and all these movies. It's unfair to say that this movie isn't that good, because if it was by itself, alone, you would say this is one of the greatest comic book movies that were ever made. I have to keep saying that to people because you're comparing them against other films that are in its own timeline, its own space, and that's not completely entirely fair. This film, judged on its own, it's a very good movie. It's a very good movie. It's better than a lot of the movies, comic book based, that come out all the time. This is a very, very good film. I had a lot of fun with it. It is very different than a lot of the films in MCU, but so was Black Panther, so was Doctor Strange, so was Ant-Man, so was Thor Ragnarok. And I can go on and on and on. It was meant to be different. I don't see a whole lot of bad in it. And I chose to do this review 24 hours after I saw the film, so I didn't come home and just start bashing things that was fresh in my mind. I'm basing all this after having gotten some sleep and thought about it as much as I could. Because the story is so simple, there's not really much to talk about story-wise. There's not much to talk about with the characters and everything. And there was a lot of big moments in the film. That's how you judge these films. What were the big moments? What did you walk away with the film? Did it teach you anything? Did it leave you emotionally invested? We all know what it felt like when we walked out of Infinity War after the snap happened and you see Thanos sitting on his farm and he is just sitting. You're like, what the fuck was that? Emotionally, that was amazing. We've all seen stuff like Black Panther, and the impact it had on you walking, just like, wow, I've never seen anything like that. And that is not really all that present in this movie. This movie is filled with stuff you've seen before. At the same time, it's a fucking blip in a sequence of blips that turn into something beautiful. And that's how I have to view it. If I view it just as its own film, it's a very good film. If I view it as an MCU film, on par with some of the better ones, no, it's good. Alone is very good to great. It's a very good movie. I do believe they should have tacked on a little bit more time at the end, and maybe broken up the exposition scenes a little bit longer. Just kind of get some different locations, only because we've seen a bunch of people at a house talking before, not too long ago in Ultron. So I would have liked to see them maybe do something a little different than that. I like the twists and turns in the movie. I thought they did a good job with that. I thought that the acting was good for the most part, outside of, again, that woman who she was friends with, I wasn't buying it. I actually thought the kid was better than the mom. I hate to say it, but I thought it was. She just wasn't convincing me of anything. So that's pretty much what I have for that. I mean, it's just nitpicking. It's a very good film. Go see it. I saw it in IMAX. I thought it worked very good on the big screen. It was made for IMAX. You could tell. I mean, there were some sequences when she's in a plane where that screen would widen up and you would see just shit it was the detail in this movie was great. Now, I will say, like, some of the special effects took me out just a little bit as well. And I wish we would have seen more of Ronan in the film. There are some things that I wanted to see, but how the hell can I say I wanted to see anything when I didn't even know anything about the cat, which is obviously from the comics. A lot of people know about that cat and what it can and can't do. I don't know. So, again, a lot of this focus on this movie wasn't so much Captain Marvel, the character, because I don't know a whole lot about her to say it should be this with her, it should be that with her. I can't base it on any of that. I am going to go check her out, some of her material. She's a very interesting character. When you're done with a movie like this and you don't know how far her potential is, your mind is going to always go further than what you actually are going to get on screen. Because if you just look at Thanos, he's nothing like he is in the comics. He's somewhat a representation of it, but he's not a full Thanos. They're just like X-Men Apocalypse. That Apocalypse is completely different than anything you will read. And these are movies. They're not supposed to be. So based on that, I'm looking at a movie version of Captain Marvel. By the way, I've always hated Captain Marvel. It's made by Marvel Comics and Marvel Studios, and you got a character called Captain Marvel. I just, something about that, even when I was a kid, I just didn't like it. I don't know. Why do you have to use your name, Marvel? Can't you? It just takes me out a little bit, because every time I hear that name, I'm like, okay, thank you for plugging your fucking company all over this character. I think about that all the time. It fucking bugs the hell out of me. I cannot stand that her name is Captain Marvel. If I had to say, and then not only that, we already have a Captain America. So not only do we have a Captain Marvel, we have a Captain America. So what the fuck? It's just like, it's a weird character when you think about it. She's a very strange character. And that's what's so cool about her, though. She is strange. And she's not like all the other Avengers. That'll do it for this Fanboy Film Nerd Galaxy Class spoiler review. I will see you guys on the next one. Take care.